Hello, Algebra 2. This is a makeup video if you are absent on the 25th or the 26th for assignment number 9, classwork. When you're done with this assignment, please upload it to your digital workbook. So take out a piece of paper, please. Okay, so if you can write down this equation and draw yourself a graph. We'll be doing 2 of these on your paper, so you can judge how big to make the graph. We're going to be doing 2. This is the first one. So write down the equation and draw yourself a graph. You can hit pause here. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to go over how to find a y-intercept. You should already know how to find the x-intercept, the leading coefficient, and the degree. And this is just a review, another second review to go over the y-intercept. To find the y-intercept, you make every x equal to 0, or just plug in zeros. And then you do the math. So wherever we see an x, we're going to plug in a 0, keep everything else, the parentheses and the other numbers, and then we'll do the math. Okay, so we're going to plug in zeros for every x, and we do this when we're finding the y-intercept. That'll be where on the graph to put a dot for where the graph will go through the y-axis. So 0, 0 minus 8, like in a 0 here, so that would be 4 times 0 plus 16. And the last one, 0 minus 3. And I'll just shorten up the parentheses. So I'm going to bring down the front 0. 0 minus 8 is negative 8. Right here, 4 times 0 is 0 plus 16 would be a 16. And the back one is 0 minus 3 would be negative 3. Now we're just going to start doing the math. What is 0 times negative 8? It's 0. So we're done with that one. So what is 0 times the back 2? So what's 0 times 16? That's another 0. What's 0 times the negative 3? That's another 0. So our y-intercept is at 0. So that means on our graph, on this y-axis, the graph will go through at 0. Okay? Now, not every time does this math work out to be a 0. It depends on how many x's you have. But you can see 0 times a 8 times a 16 times a 3, it's going to eventually end out to be equal to 0. All right? So our y-intercept is at 0. I'm just going to put that answer right there. And I'm going to erase my other work. And now we're going to find the x-intercepts. Okay. So to find the x-intercepts, we take each one of these and we set them equal to 0. So each parenthesis has to be set equal to 0. And then we solve. So we take each parenthesis and we set them equal to 0. It's called the zero product property. And then we do the math. So already right here, that answer is done. So one x-intercept is at 0. This one, we would add 8 to both sides. So this would be x is equal to positive 8. And this one, we have to subtract 16 to both sides and then divide by the 4. And if we divide by 4, we get x equals negative 4, right? Because negative 16 divided by 4. Another one. In the last one, we would add 3 to both sides. So x is equal to 3. And then we can put those dots on the graph. So we already have the dot at 0. We need one at 8. We need one at -4. We need one at 3. Okay? All right, so students know shortcuts here. So let me just go ahead and change my pen here. So students know when they see a plane x or a plane x squared, they know that the intercept is 0. When it's just a plane x and then like -8, they know just to take the opposite number, +8, just like right here. This one you have to solve because you have a 4x. And then this one, kids know that since it's just a plain x, that they just look at -3 and they just take a +3. Okay? So those are some shortcuts. Okay, do they bounce or cross? So we have a graph that would bounce if anywhere you have a square or an x squared. So if you had something like, I'm just making it up, x plus 10 squared or x squared, if you have the exponent, then you have a bounce. And what that means is your graph would come up and hit the x-axis and then come back down instead of going all the way through, or maybe it bounces right here, right? So you need to know if it bounces, you just go ahead and look at the original equation and see if anywhere, if there's an exponent. So you're looking right here, right here, right here. You're looking for an exponent of 2 or 4, and there's not one there, so there's no bounces. So the graph is going to go through the x-axis at all our red dots, so no bounces. Okay, now we need to know the degree. This will tell us which way our arrows go. So for your degree, you count how many x's total. So we just go to the equation, x times x times x times x. So that would be x times x times x times x. That's x to the 4th. So our degree is 4th degree. Why do we need to know what our degree is? Our degree we need to know because that tells us if our arrows both go up or both go down. Or yes, both going the same way, or one arrow going one way and one arrow the other. So since this is x to the 4th, 4 is an even number. And then we know that on the 4th degrees, when it's even, either both arrows go up, how many wiggles we're not talking about, or both arrows go down, how many wiggles is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the direction of the arrows. So for even degree, either both arrows go in the same direction. You decide whether they go up or down based on the leading coefficient. That's the number and its sign in the front of the equation, your leading coefficient. So your leading coefficient is a +1. So it's positive leading coefficient, 4th degree. So that means since it's positive, it means both arrows go up. If it was a negative leading coefficient, both arrows would go down. Both arrows going up, I'm going to draw one above the -4, and I'm going to draw an arrow above the 8. And then I'm just going to go down and do the wiggles in between. You just want to hit the dots and come up and down and up and down. And there's your graph. Now your loops and how deep they are, you'll be talking about in pre-calculus. Right now we're just talking about how to find the x-intercepts, whether arrows are up or down, and how to find the y-intercept, okay? All right, let's get ready to do one more. If you can go ahead and write down on your piece of paper this whole equation and draw yourself a graph, please hit pause. Please hit pause on the video. Okay, so we're going to find the y-intercept again. Remember, you make the x's worth a 0. So right here, we're going to plug in a 0. Here, here, and here. We plug in zeros and we do the entire math row. So I'm going to bring down -1. This will be 2 times 0 plus 8. The next one is 0 minus 7. Next one is 0 plus 1 squared. And the last one is 0 minus 3. And then we need to do the math. So we're going to start with the parentheses. We're going to bring down that front -1. Let me just change colors here real quick. Okay, we're going to bring down the front -1, and inside the parentheses, 2 times 0 is 0, so the parentheses just has 8. The next parentheses, 0 minus 7 is -7. 0 plus 1 inside here is 1 squared, which is just worth 1. And the back one is 0 minus 3, so that's -3. And then you can choose to run that on a calculator. So we have, let's see here. If you run that on a calculator, it would be -168. So the y-intercept value is at -168. That means on the graph, on the y-axis, way far down is going to be the y-intercept, way far off your grid. Okay, so right now we're just going ahead to practice how to calculate it. So we just want to be able to get this number. Hit pause if you need a minute. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is find our x-intercepts. And for that, remember, wherever you see the x's, we set them equal to 0 and solve for x. And I did show you the shortcut. So if you remember that. So this one we have to subtract 8 to both sides and then divide by 2. So x would be -4. So divide by 2, right? This one you would add 7 to both sides, or when it's easy, when it's just a plain x, remember I told you just take the opposite here. So this one, if you subtract 1, it's x equals -1. This one, if you add 3 to both sides, it would be x is equal to 3. Okay, so we have -4, we have 7, -1, and 3. And then you just make all the dots on the graph like we did before. So this one is -4, and we have one at 7. We have one at -1, and we have one at +3. So there you make your dots on your x-axis for your x-intercepts. Okay, now we have to check for the degree, count how many x's. So, oops, sorry. X times x times x twice, and another one. So you have to, when you have x squared right here, this exponent, you have to count your x's twice. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is x to the 5th. So this is a 5th degree. So 5 is an odd number. That means when you draw your arrows, you have one arrow one way and one arrow another way. So it could be this way, or it could be opposite. Could look like this, right? Now for this set of arrows, you only look to the right arrow to decide. So this one, the first one, the right arrow goes up. The second one, the right arrow goes down. So this would be for positive leading coefficient because the right arrow's up. This is for negative leading coefficient because the right arrow is down. So what is the leading coefficient? Leading coefficient is the number in the very front. It's right here. This is your leading coefficient. It's -1. So we're not going to choose this graph because that's when the right arrow goes up. We're going to use the negative leading coefficient where your right arrow goes down. So then we go over to the graph. The right arrow goes down, so I'll put that underneath the 7. And on the left side, the right arrow goes up. Remember, it's the right side arrow that you're looking at for positive or negative leading coefficient. Okay? And then just draw your wiggles. And, oh, well, wait a minute. We have to check for the bounce. Sorry. So do they bounce or cross? So when you're looking for your bounces, you're looking for exponents. So I'm going to go back up over here. And right here, you have a bounce. And so the bounce is when you have an exponent. We have the exponent on this x plus 1. So our bounce is at the -1. So I'm going to write on here bounce for that -1. That way I'll remember when I'm drawing my graph that at this -1 spot, I have to do the bounce. Okay? And you're looking for your bounce, just to restate it, it's when you have an exponent of 2. Okay? So I'm going to start here at the 7. I'm going to go up and down, and then I'm going to bounce at the -1 and go back up. And there's our graph. You have to have the bounce at -1 because of the exponent. Remember that the bounce has the exponent. Okay? All right, remember to title your paper Classwork Assignment Number 9 and upload that to your digital workbook. Thank you. These are your current assignments that are due. Make sure your digital workbook is all caught up.